Okay, now let's look at what are the different ways of writing the SQL code with for the DB2. So first one we have is interactive mode, and the next one is what we have is embedded mode. Now let's look at what is interactive mode within an SQL. Interactive SQL means that so whatever we have practiced right using QMF and SPUFI, that is DB2I, so within the foreground, so which is nothing but it's an interactive. That is, you are writing the query and immediately you are getting the results, right? So that is an interactive mode. Embedded means you are writing your code within the program, in the COBOL program, so that is an embedded mode. So in interactive mode, which we have some limitations, which is no provision for declaring a variables and no control structure. That is, you cannot write if, perform, else logics when conditions, though I mean when means you can write it in select, but if, perform, so whatever the programming logic that you were using in the COBOL program, you cannot do that. And no validations of input data, you cannot validate anything, and no reuse of business logic, and no block structures like paragraphs. So these are certain limitations using interactive. So that's the reason whenever we are using our interactives, that is mainly for the validation or for some testing purpose that we use initially purpose. Okay, so now let's look at an embedded SQL. Embedded SQL statements are processed by a pre-compiler before the application program is compiled. Okay, and the embedded SQL statements are processed by an SQL preprocessor to form the database request module. That we call it as a DBRM before the application program is compiled, and it consists of two parts. One is a COBOL part and an SQL part. Okay, so both the parts needs to be processed separately. So we will look into more details when I explain you about the COBOL compilation part, especially when we are using a COBOL DB2. So the embedded SQL statements are processed by a pre-compiler before the application program is compiled. Okay, so within a COBOL program, so we have called statements called exec SQL and endexec. So within that we write a SQL queries. So what happens is before our code gets compiled, so we have a pre-compiler where this executes, this SQL statements are again being compiled, being converted to a COBOL statement, so that the compiler can understand, right? So that's the reason we are mentioning it as embedded SQL statements are processed by a SQL preprocessor to form the database request module before the application program is compiled, right? It consists of two parts, COBOL and SQL. Now let's look at what is the difference. Assuming table employee is created with columns employee number, name and age. So to display name and age of a given employee numbers, we use interactive SQL run using. So in the same way we can use embedded SQL placing in the COBOL program. Let's say if you are using in an interactive mode, how do we write the code? So just you mention select name, age from employee where employee number is equals to 100. So the same way when you are using an embedded SQL, so how do you write exec SQL select star into WS record from EMP where employee number equal to 100. WS record can be the big structure where it has holding the name and age, or maybe the several different fields. If you exactly want the same details, so you can say like select name age into WS name colon WS age from EMP where employee number equal to 100, right? So when we say star, so we need to give the complete record. When you are saying selecting a specific fields, you need to WS record is a group variable here, by the way. So WS name and WS age are the individual elementary variables where this name will be copied to WS name and the age will be copied to WS age and WS age, right? So here do you see any into? No, right? So here we are seeing into. Into is something extra that we see when you are writing an embedded SQL, right? So in the next video we will see about the DCL Gen, host cam, so the other things that will come up. Okay, so now we are entering into the DB2 application programming. So far you have seen all the practical things on the SQL, and I hope you have practiced very well on the SQL DDL, DML and DCL commands. So now we are entering into the DB2 application program. In the last video you have seen the difference between the interactive and the embedded SQL, right? So now we are completely talking about the embedded SQL. So how do we write the SQL queries within the application program? So that's the main goal in the of our upcoming tutorials. Okay, so with that said, in order to set up working on this application programming, so we'll go step by step. First step is to create three different PDS members. So that is one is a DBRM lib, and other is a DB2 load lib, and then we have a DCL Gen. So DCL Gen is the place where we create all the members, records related to the tables, and load library is a load module, and DBRM lib is a compiled version of COBOL and DB2, where we'll talk in detail about those things. So for now you can consider like what is DBRM lib is when we are writing the COBOL and an SQL code combined together, we have to do some pre-compilation. So what do mean by pre-compilation means whatever the SQL code that you are writing within the COBOL, so that will be converted, SQL code will be converted into a COBOL understandable language. So that particular piece of code will be written here. Okay, so for that we need to have that particular DBRM lib created. Okay, so I have that DBRM lib created with the fixed block 80 bytes. Okay, then we have so these two are PDS, and then we have a DCL Gen where we can create our copybooks, I can say. So let's say like in the last earlier videos I have told you, right? So how we have a table structure different and the working storage variables are different, right? So for example, integer can be like S9 of 4 comp, and char can be of x of 10, or whatever the declaration you write, right? So that way, so those kind of a copybooks we can store in the DCL Gen. And then finally you have the load lib. Load lib should be created in this format. Okay, now let's connect to SPUFI, that is DB2I, and then create some member there where we can write our table creation, and then we'll follow on with other things. So in this member you can write all the SQL queries, unlike I have shown you in the practical videos of a SPUFI where you are practicing SQL queries. So it stores what is the difference between QMF and SPUFI? QMF stores the queries temporarily, whereas SPUFI can store the queries permanently, right? So with that said, I have this PDS member created, and let me connect to this and show you. Yeah, I have this, and inside this I have a member name. So then let me go to this member, copy this member, and come back to this home screen. So here you have an option 15, so enter type 15. So this option 15 may be different. It depends on the which mainframe ID you are using. If you are maybe the different vendors that they will be providing in the market, right? So they may have a different options on this, so you can always check with them. And also if you're working in any organization, they may have a different option, maybe 8th or 9th, so whatever it is, but you check for this DB2I. Okay, just 15, and from that, within that, the first option that we have is SPUFI. Okay, so here just type 1, so and then enter your member name here. So after entering the member name, so if you want to store the results in your own data set, so you can specify that other sequential data set. By default it is a SPUFI. So then enter. So it says some warning, DB2 data corruption can result from the SPUFI session because of the CCC, but the terminal is not the same as the CSC ID, so you can ignore that. Press enter. Okay, yeah, so now what I wanted to do is just I wanted to create an employee table first. Okay, so create, let's say create a table. Since I'm creating, let's have okay, in development I'm creating a table named as dev_emp. Okay, so where it has the properties like let's say department number, or not say EID, let's say employee ID, which is of character, let's say which is of 5 bytes. Okay, and now let's say and make sure like this is not null, and let's say employee name, so I don't want this. Okay, let's say e name, and let's take which is of also of character of, let's say, another 15 or 20 bytes, let's say. And this is also I don't want any null values to be added, so here, so then let's say employee date of birth, and let's okay, and make this as a date field, and this also should not be not null. And then let's take employee salary, which is of numeric, let's say 6 digits or 7 digits, 7,2. And then let's say department, employee department, which is of a character of 5 bytes again, and this let's take null. And make a primary key for what? EID, right? EID. Then close this in database and then table space, right? So this is how we can code this. And okay, so we need to give a comma here, comma to continue, not null, comma, and comma, right? So now you have everything ready here. So what you can do here is you can just give 3 semicolons and press F3 so that it will execute. Okay, 3 semicolons then F3, so that the query will be running and it will show you the result in this. So what is done? So you have entered this query, I mean this, to create a table, and the message that you got is statement execution was successful and the SQL code is 0. We will talk about this, what is SQL code, how these are coming in these programming languages. And then we also created a unique index. No, so this is something wrong, which is I have to then okay, let me press F3 and again go back here. So after this we need to create a unique index. So how do we create an unique? Whenever we have a primary keys, we need to create an index for that. So index is employee ID index on table dv underscore emp development, and ID is emp ID. So now I don't want to run this, so then give colon here, okay, double dash, so that this will become a comment, right? Now press F3. Now you can see is undefined. metcave.dev underscore emp is an undefined name. Why it is telling undefined name? Create. So which query it is executing? Okay, let me see what is wrong there. Create unique index. Let's here. Okay, dev underscore emp, right? Okay, so since, let us see if this is created or not. Let's go select star from dev underscore emp. Now what is it saying? Is an undefined name. So that means that this is it not allowing underscore. Let me see that, or else we will create another time. let's say you can execute multiple queries here. Okay, let's say like DEMP. Okay, I'm trying to create a table named as DEMP, and let's run this. Sorry, 3 semicolon, press F3. Now you can see table has successfully created with SQL code as 0, and then unique index is also created with SQL code as 0. Okay, so now we have the complete table created successfully, right? So what are the steps that we have done here? So first thing is we have created a PDS named as SPUFI, and in that we have written one member. So within that member you can store all the queries, right? Okay, that's it. So in the next video I'll show you how do we create a copybook, equivalent copybook related to this. So this is everything. How do we convert this into an what do we call as a COBOL statements or the COBOL variables? I need to convert this character, date, numeric into a COBOL variables. So how do we do that? Let's see that in the next video. Okay, let me talk about another important topic, that is DCL Gen. So what does it exactly mean? So in the last video we have seen like how to create a table, right? So in terms of SQL, so if we want to use that tables within a COBOL program, so we need to convert that SQL structure into COBOL understandable variables like integer, character, varchar. So we have to convert into our COBOL programming understandable variables. Yes, we have an option to do it manually as well. So since we know the different types, for example, int can be written as varchar of 4, small int can be written as varchar of 2, I mean s9 of 4 com3 and s9 of 2 com2. That way we can return it. But if you have the table with the 50 fields or 60 fields, it will be difficult for you, right? So there are challenges. So to avoid that, we'll be using DCL Gen. So DCL Gen stands for declaration generator. So DCL Gen is an IBM provided function that generates include members for a DB2 tables to use in the COBOL. So we also have, and where we declare this, we declare in a working storage section. Okay, it automatically generates the host variable needed given in the input table name, and with this way, which makes it easy for the programmers, and it is mainly used to avoid the errors that a developer can make, and also it is easy for maintenance. So this is all about the DCL Gen. Let's connect to mainframe and see how do we generate this. So in the last video I've shown you, right, we have created a DEMP table, right? So now we will create the COBOL structure of the table. Okay, let's connect to SPUFI. One SPUFI. So let me enter. So let me make a note of select. Not this. So our member was different, right? So our member was SPUFI. MEM1, I guess. Right? No. So let me check that. What was that member name? Yeah, SPUFI MEMB1, right? MEMB1. Okay, so we have this output. Okay, so this is what the, so now we will create the equivalent variables for this, right? Okay, so let me make a note of this first. Okay, copy it. Maybe you can copy it to the notepad. Now you have an option of DCL Gen. Click on to DCL Gen, and so here let me give my member name. Dataset name can be sequential, or one second, let me go back and to, okay, so here we need to we have created a DCL Gen, right? So where is that DCL Gen? So where is that? Let's see. Okay, yeah. So here we have the DCL Gen, right? So let's take this, okay, and let's paste it here. And so you have the source table name. Source table name was DEMP. DEMP was my source table name, right? So similarly, I want enter destination dataset can be sequential or partition. So the dataset name should be this. So here is what it will create that. Let me say DEMP. Okay, let me write the same thing so that we can create the DCL Gen for that particular table. And in the action we can say it as a add, since we are adding this new one, so that it has to create that particular thing, right? So then what are the options we have? Delimited, enter yes, column label. So column label you can still keep it as no, and let's say what all the other things we have. Yeah, so these are the things that we have, and press enter. Okay, now you can see execution complete, Menger DEMP added successfully. Okay, so congratulations. So now we got the structure of the table. So now let's go to 3.4 and see how it got created, right? So okay, so now you have this. Awesome, right? So now you can see that you have this particular DCL Gen created, the equivalent table properties of it. Let's compare this. Okay, let's compare with this. Okay, so now you had the character, date, numeric, and this for the specific fields. When you look at here, create table employee ID of character of 5 bytes. Now what is the equivalent of its? Employee ID picture class x of 5, right? So then you have employee name, right? Employee name, then you have as x of 20, so here char of 20. Employee date of birth, again it's converted to x of 10. Salary numeric 7,2, that is S9 of E, 9 of 2, usage com 3. Then you have a department which is created of char of 5, and that is again created with of x of 5. So this will be the equivalent copybook, I can say. So the equivalent copybook of this DEMP. So that's where now again you can see it has added the another name to this copybook named as DCLDEMP. So which is by default it's going to add with this name, right? So this is how you can create the copybook. So now you can see, so this is an equivalent structure of this. If you want to create this table in your COBOL program, so you can copy this code, and you can write this in the COBOL program so that it can create this table. So now we have created the table using the foreground using a SPUFI, right? So if you want to create the same in SQL language, COBOL program, so we can use this code and we can create that as well, right? So again, so the COBOL iteration for table DMP, so you can use this as well. Okay, so that's how we can that's how we generate the structure of the COBOL program within this. So in the next video I'll show you how do we write a COBOL program using this tool. Okay, continuation to the DCL Gen. So earlier when we have created the DCL Gen variables for the COBOL, so we have used this option called as action add, and the column label as no and column suffix as no, right? So it created this output, right? So it created an exec SQL statement for this, and also we have the host variables created. that is related to COBOL working storage variable. So for example, if I am using column label as S here and field suffix as ws hyphen, then you have to change the column suffix to s, so that when you generate this, and since we already have the DEMP, so you need to use an action as replace. So what it will do is it will create this kind of a statement. So I have suffix with ws, right? So it is going to create a ws hyphen eid, and also it has given a label, so like a star, and this says like employee ID, and this is an employee name, date of birth. Earlier within the table you have the employee date of birth, and within the table, in the table the name is EID, and here within the COBOL it is converted as EWS ED. That way it shows the difference if you are using an option as column label. So whereas earlier we didn't use the option as column label as no, so that's the reason it is not showing anything equivalent to this, right? So if you are looking for more in detail specific, then you can specify these options, so that you can see the table field name that we have declared in SQL and the equivalent host variable. Okay, so that's the different options that you can try while practicing, and the same thing that you can use it in a application program. So before, in the next video, I wanted to explain about the host variables. Okay, now let's talk about the host variables. So host variables are nothing but sets which are declared in a host language. So that means so far we have created this equivalent variables of SQL fields, right? That is attributes and equivalent variables that we have created, right? So those variables are nothing but it's in a host variables. If you want to see that, so these are nothing but it's in host variables, right? So which is an equivalent variable of the equivalent variable of a table field is nothing but it's a host variable. Let's see, look at some properties. How they are used. They act as an interface between an application program and the database. Using that host variable, we are going to connect to the database. I mean, we send these values to the database and we get the information from there, right? So you can normally we cannot directly interact with the database from the application. We need an host variables defined. So with the help of host variables only, we can communicate. They need some variable communications to data from the table. Like if we want to insert some values into the table, then we need to explicitly move the values to the host variable and then perform the insert operation. So they need to be declared buffer all the values, right? So that's what we created in the earlier. One important point to be considered is declaring the host variable is that the data type must be the compatible, right? So we are going to since we are using a DCL Gen, so then we can use it. Right, so for every var variable declared, so two elementary items of form, one correspond to the length and other is its text. So that I'll be explaining you when creating the DCL Gen with the varchar also. We'll try with that as well. So that means it will create two variables here. So earlier in the in DCL Gen, so when I'm creating the table equivalent host variables for that particular table, we have seen only char and numeric. But we didn't try for the varchar. Varchar when converts to host variables, it will create two variables. One is a length and another is a text. While selecting such values, insert values into such an item, special care should be taken. Okay, we have to take special care. So why? Because we move some -1 to that length and then we pass on the actual value. The host variables cannot be grouped. Another important point to be noted, the host variable cannot be a group item because DB2 expects the host variable to have a picture class, you know, right? So in when we are using the group, so we'll not have a picture class, we have an inventory variables, so you cannot use it. So that's the reason they cannot create. For the same reason, host variables cannot be renamed as well. Okay, right. So that's all about the host variable. So as I have shown you earlier, the host variables are nothing that these variables. Okay.